The sun beat down hard on the dusty town square in Santa Fe. It was 1862, and the heat made everything shimmer like a bad dream. 20-year-old Rebecca stood on the wooden platform, her hands tied behind her back. She could hear her heart beating so loud she thought everyone else could hear it too. The crowd below her looked up with hungry eyes. Rough miners with dirt under their fingernails, cattle ranchers in fancy hats, traders who smelled like whiskey and sweat. They were all there for one reason: to buy her. "Ladies and gentlemen," called out the auctioneer, a thin man with a voice like a snake.
"Here we have a fine young woman.
Strong, healthy, can read and write. Perfect for houseworker." He paused and gave a nasty smile. "Whatever else you might need." Rebecca felt sick. This couldn't be happening. Just 3 months ago, she had been living peacefully with her father on their small farm outside town. He wasn't the best father, but he was all she had after her mother died from fever 2 years back. Then everything went wrong. Her father started drinking more, started gambling at the saloon every night. She begged him to stop, but he wouldn't listen. "Just one big win," he always said. "Just one big win and we'll be rich." But the big win never came. Instead, the debts got bigger and bigger. When her father died suddenly from his weak heart, Rebecca thought her troubles were over. She was wrong. The debts didn't die with him. "You owe money," the sheriff had told her just a week ago. "Your father borrowed from some very serious people. They want their money back." "But I don't have any money," Rebecca had said. "The farm is all I have." The sheriff shook his head. "The farm isn't worth enough. But you are." That's how she ended up here, on this platform, being sold like a horse or a cow. "What am I bid for this lovely young lady?" the auctioneer shouted. "She's educated, can cook and clean, young and strong." A voice from the crowd called out, $50. Rebecca's stomach dropped. $50. That's all she was worth to these people. 50, I hear. Do I hear 60? 60, came another voice. Rebecca looked out at the crowd and tried to see who was bidding on her. In the front row stood a big man with a black hat and cold eyes. His name was William Drake, and everyone in town knew him. He owned the biggest cattle ranch in the territory. He also had a reputation for being cruel to the people who worked for him. 75, Drake called out, his voice booming across the square. The other bidders went quiet. Nobody wanted to go against Drake. He had too much money and too much power. 75 going once, the auctioneer said. Rebecca felt panic rising in her chest. She had heard stories about Drake, about what happened to the women who worked on his ranch, about how they were never seen in town again. 75 going twice. She looked around desperately. The crowd was spread out around the platform, but there was a gap between two groups of people. If she could just get there, sold to Mr. Drake for $75. The crowd cheered, but Rebecca wasn't listening anymore. She was moving. With a surge of strength she didn't know she had, she twisted her wrists and broke free from the ropes. They had been old and not tied very well. "Hey," the auctioneer shouted. "Stop her!" Rebecca jumped off the platform and hit the ground running. Her long dress made it hard to move fast, but fear gave her speed. She pushed through the surprised crowd, knocking over a man with a bottle of whiskey. "Catch her!" Drake's voice roared behind her. "Don't let her get away!" Rebecca ran like she had never run before. Her bare feet slapped against the hard dirt of the main street. She could hear heavy boots pounding behind her, getting closer. She turned down a narrow alley between two adobe buildings. The walls were high on both sides, casting cool shadows. But the alley was a dead end. She realized her mistake too late. "Got you now." A rough voice behind her made her spin around. Two of Drake's men stood at the mouth of the alley, blocking her escape. They were both big and mean-looking. One had a scar across his cheek. The other was missing 2 front teeth. "Mr. Drake paid good money for you," Scarface said, walking slowly toward her. "You're going to come with us nice and quiet." "No," Rebecca said, backing up against the wall. "I won't go." "You can't make me," Missing Teeth laughed. "We can make you do whatever we want. You belong to Mr. Drake now." "I don't belong to anyone," Rebecca said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. The two men looked at each other and grinned. They were enjoying this. "We'll see about that," Scarface said, reaching for her arm. Rebecca dodged to the side, but there was nowhere to go. The alley was too narrow and the men were too big. She was trapped. Then she heard something that changed everything. Horse hooves. Coming fast. The two men heard it too and turned around. A rider burst into the alley, his horse rearing up on its back legs. The men jumped back in surprise. The rider was unlike anyone Rebecca had ever seen. His skin was dark bronze, and his long black hair flew behind him like a banner. He wore no shirt, just a leather vest, and his arms were strong and muscled. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They were fierce and wild like a hawk's eyes. Apache. Missing Teeth gasped, reaching for his gun, but the rider was faster. He kicked his horse forward, and the animal's shoulder slammed into Scarface, sending him flying into the wall. Missing Teeth tried to draw his weapon, but the rider was already moving. He swung down from his horse and grabbed the man's wrist, twisting it until he dropped his gun with a cry of pain. Both of Drake's men scrambled to their feet and ran back toward the main street, shouting for help. The rider turned to look at Rebecca. His dark eyes studied her face for a long moment. Then he extended his hand down to her. "They come back soon," he said in English that was clear but accented, "with many men. You want to be free?" Rebecca stared at his outstretched hand. She knew what people said about the Apache. They said they were savage, dangerous, that they killed white people for sport. But this man had just saved her from Drake's men, and something in his eyes told her he understood what it meant to be hunted. The sound of angry voices was getting closer. Drake and his men were coming. "Choose now," the Apache said. "Come with me or go back to them." Rebecca looked toward the mouth of the alley where the voices were getting louder. Then she looked back at the warrior's hand. She grabbed it. He pulled her up behind him on his horse just as Drake and 6 armed men appeared at the end of the alley. "There she is," Drake shouted. "Kill the Indian and bring me the girl." But they were already moving. The Apache's horse leaped forward, charging straight at the group of men. They scattered like frightened chickens as the horse and its 2 riders burst out of the alley and onto the main street. "Hold tight," the warrior said over his shoulder. Rebecca wrapped her arms around his waist as they galloped out of town and into the desert beyond. Behind them, she could hear gunshots and angry shouts getting fainter and fainter. For the first time in months, Rebecca felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. The horses' hooves thundered across the hard desert ground as they left Santa Fe behind. Rebecca held tight to the Apache warrior, feeling the powerful muscles in his back as he guided his mount through the rocky terrain. The wind whipped her long hair across her face and dust filled her mouth, but she didn't care. She was free. Behind them, she could still hear the distant sound of pursuit. Drake wasn't the kind of man to give up easily, especially when he had paid money for something he considered his property. "What's your name?" Rebecca called out over the wind. "Ayan," the warrior replied without turning around. "It means eternal." "I'm Rebecca." Ayan nodded but didn't respond. He was focused on the path ahead, guiding his horse between tall rock formations that rose up from the desert floor like ancient monuments. The sun was getting lower in the sky, painting the rocks red and orange. Rebecca had never been this far from town before. The landscape was beautiful but also frightening. Everything looked the same: rocks and sand and scrubby plants as far as she could see. How would they ever find their way? But Ayan seemed to know exactly where he was going. He took turns between the rocks without hesitation, following paths that Rebecca couldn't even see. After what felt like hours, Ayan pulled his horse to a stop behind a large boulder. He held up his hand for silence and listened carefully. Rebecca held her breath, straining to hear what he was hearing. There it was. The sound of horses, still distant but getting closer. "They follow our trail," Ayan said quietly. "Drake brings many men." "How do you know it's Drake?" Rebecca whispered. Ayan pointed to the ground. Rebecca looked down and saw the clear marks their horse had left in the sandy soil. Even she could see the trail they had made. "We must move," Ayan said. "But first, horse needs water." He guided his mount to a small pool of water hidden between 2 rocks. Rebecca was amazed. How had he known it was there? To her, it just looked like more desert. While the horse drank, Ayan studied the terrain around them. He pointed to a narrow canyon that cut through the rocks ahead. "That way leads to my people," he said, "but is dangerous. Rocks can fall. Easy to get lost." "And the other way?" Rebecca asked. "Goes back toward town, where Drake waits for you." It wasn't really a choice at all. The horse finished drinking and they set off again. The canyon was narrow, with walls that rose high on both sides. The sound of their horses' hooves echoed off the stone walls. Rebecca felt like they were riding through a tunnel made of rock. The canyon twisted and turned, sometimes so narrow that Rebecca could almost touch both walls at the same time. Other times it opened up into small valleys filled with strange plants she had never seen before. As they rode deeper into the maze of stone, Rebecca began to worry. What if they got lost? What if Drake's men knew another way through? What if this Ayan was leading her into a trap? But every time doubt crept into her mind, she remembered Drake's cold eyes and cruel smile. Whatever lay ahead couldn't be worse than what she had left behind. The sun was setting now, turning the canyon walls purple and gold. The air was getting cooler, which was a relief after the heat of the day. But with the approaching darkness came new fears. What kinds of animals lived out here? What if they couldn't see the path? As if reading her thoughts, Ayan spoke. We stop soon. Horse is tired, and night travel is dangerous here. They came to a wider part of the canyon where a small stream trickled down from the rocks above. Ayan dismounted and helped Rebecca down from the horse. Her legs were shaky from the long ride. We rest here tonight, Ayan said. Tomorrow we reach my people. He gathered some dry wood and started a small fire. The flames cast dancing shadows on the canyon walls. Rebecca sat down on a flat rock, suddenly realizing how tired and hungry she was. Ayan pulled some dried meat and berries from a pouch on his horse. He offered them to Rebecca. The meat was tough and salty, but it was the best thing she had tasted all day. Why did you help me? Rebecca asked as they ate. Ayan was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. I know what it is like to be hunted, he finally said. To have others decide your fate. The soldiers hunt your people. Soldiers, settlers, men like Drake who think they own everything. Ayan's voice was bitter. They take our land, kill our buffalo, steal our children to put in their schools. Rebecca had heard stories about the Apache raids, about settlers being killed and kidnapped, but she had never thought about why the Apache might be fighting back. My family had a farm, Rebecca said quietly. Just a small one, but it was home. What happened? Rebecca told him about her father's gambling, about the debts, about waking up to find men in her house telling her she had to pay what her father owed. They said I could work off the debt, she continued, but I knew what kind of work they meant. That's when they decided to sell me instead. Ayan nodded grimly. White man's law. Everything has a price, even people. Not anymore, Rebecca said with more confidence than she felt. I won't let anyone own me again. Freedom is not something you find, Ayan said, poking at the fire with a stick. It's something you fight for every day. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the desert. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The horse snorted and shifted its weight. Do you think they're still following us? Rebecca asked. Ayan stood up and walked to the edge of their small camp. He listened carefully, then came back and sat down. Yes, he said simply. Drake is a determined man, but Canyon has many paths. By morning they will be lost. And if they're not? Ayan's hand moved to the knife at his belt. Then we fight. Rebecca shivered, and not just from the cold night air. She had never been in a real fight in her life. The closest she had come was arguing with her father about his drinking. I don't know how to fight, she admitted. You fought today, Ayan pointed out. You broke free from ropes. You ran when others would have given up. You chose freedom over safety. Rebecca thought about this. She supposed he was right. She had fought in her own way. Get some sleep, Ayan said, moving to sit with his back against a rock where he could watch the canyon entrance. Tomorrow will be a hard day. Rebecca lay down on the sandy ground, using her arm as a pillow. The stars above were brighter than she had ever seen them in town. There were so many they looked like scattered diamonds on black cloth. As she drifted off to sleep, she heard Ayan singing softly in his own language. The melody was sad and beautiful, and it made her think of home. Not the home she had lost, but the idea of home. A place where you belonged, where you were safe. Maybe she would find that with Ayan's people, or maybe she would have to keep running forever. Either way, it was better than the life Drake had planned for her. In her dreams, she rode through endless canyons of red stone, chasing something she couldn't quite see. Behind her, dark figures on horses followed, always getting closer but never quite catching up. She woke once during the night to find Ayan still sitting guard, silhouetted against the dying fire. His presence made her feel safe enough to fall back asleep. When morning came, they would have to face whatever Drake and his men had planned. But for now, under the vast desert sky, Rebecca felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt free. Rebecca woke to the sound of horses echoing through the canyon. Her heart jumped as she sat up quickly, looking around in panic. The fire had died down to just glowing coals, and the early morning light was just starting to touch the top of the canyon walls. Jan was already standing, his hand on his horse's neck to keep the animal quiet. He held a finger to his lips, warning Rebecca to stay silent. The sound of hooves was getting closer, along with the voices of men calling to each other. "Check every side canyon," came a voice that Rebecca recognized with a chill. It was Drake himself. "Trail goes cold here, boss," another voice replied. "Could have gone anywhere." "Then we search everywhere," Drake snapped. "I'm not losing that girl, and I want that Apache dead." Ayan moved silently to Rebecca's side. "We go now," he whispered. Very quiet. He helped her onto his horse, then swung up behind her. Instead of heading deeper into the canyon where the voices were coming from, he guided the horse to a narrow crack in the rock wall that Rebecca hadn't even noticed the night before. The opening was so narrow that Ayan had to dismount and lead the horse through by hand, with Rebecca still on its back. The rock walls pressed in on both sides, and she had to duck her head to avoid hitting the low ceiling. Behind them, the voices were getting louder. Rebecca heard Drake curse loudly when he found their cold campfire. "They were here," he said. "Can't be far."
Spread out!
The crack in the rock seemed to go on forever. Rebecca's shoulders brushed against the stone walls, and she began to worry they would get stuck. But finally, the passage opened up into a hidden valley that took her breath away. Green grass covered the valley floor, fed by a stream that sparkled in the morning light. Trees provided shade around the water, and wildflowers grew in patches of bright color. After the harsh desert, it looked like paradise. "How did you know this was here?" Rebecca whispered in amazement. "My grandfather showed me when I was boy," Ayan replied, mounting his horse again. "He said Apache must know all the secret places, for when the world becomes dangerous." They rode across the valley, and Rebecca saw that it was bigger than she had first thought. The stream wound through grass and trees for what looked like miles. Birds sang in the branches, and she saw a deer drinking at the water's edge before it bounded away into the trees. On the far side of the valley, another passage led through the rocks. This one was wider, more like a proper canyon. As they rode through it, Rebecca noticed markings on the walls. Pictures of animals and people painted in red and black. "What are those?" she asked. "Stories," Ayan said. "My people have been traveling these paths for hundreds of years. The pictures tell of hunts, of battles, of the spirits that live in the rocks." The canyon opened onto a high mesa that gave them a view for miles in every direction. Rebecca could see the desert stretching out below them, with mountain ranges rising in the distance. The morning sun painted everything in shades of gold and red. "There," Ayan pointed to a cluster of mountains to the north. "My people camp in those mountains. We will be safe there." "Safe from Drake?" "Drake's men fear to go so deep into Apache territory. They know stories of what happens to white men who venture too far from their towns." As they rode down from the mesa, Rebecca saw movement in the distance, riders coming toward them. Her heart started pounding again until Ayan raised his hand in greeting. "Apache," he said with relief in his voice. 3 warriors approached on painted horses. They wore their hair long like Ayan, and their faces were painted with stripes of red and white. They spoke rapidly in their own language, gesturing toward Rebecca. Rebecca couldn't understand the words, but she could tell they weren't happy to see her. Their voices were sharp, and they kept pointing at her and shaking their heads. "What are they saying?" she asked nervously. "They ask why I bring white women to our camp," Ayan replied. "They say it will bring trouble." "Maybe they're right," Rebecca said quietly. "Maybe I should go back." "Go back to what?" Ayan turned to look at her. "To Drake? To being sold like cattle?" One of the warriors spoke again, his voice angry. Ayan responded in the same sharp tone, and Rebecca could tell they were arguing about her. Finally, the oldest of the 3 warriors, a man with gray streaks in his hair and scars on his chest, spoke in English. "I am Nalnish," he said to Rebecca, "war chief of this band. Ayan says you flee from bad men, says you have nowhere else to go." Rebecca nodded, not trusting her voice. "White people bring death to Apache," Nalnish continued. "Soldiers follow white captives. Towns pay rewards for Apache scalps. You understand?" "I understand," Rebecca said. "I don't want to bring trouble to your people, but I have nowhere else to go." Nalnish studied her face for a long moment. Then he spoke to Ayan in Apache. The conversation went back and forth for several minutes before Nalnish finally nodded. You come to camp, he said to Rebecca, but you prove you belong. Show you are not spy. Show you can live Apache way. If you bring danger to my people. He left the threat unfinished. The group rode together toward the mountains. As they climbed higher, the air got cooler and the landscape changed. Pine trees grew among the rocks and Rebecca could smell their sweet scent. Finally, they crested a ridge and Rebecca saw the Apache camp spread out in a hidden valley below. It was bigger than she had expected, with dozens of wickiups, dome-shaped shelters made of branches and animal hides. Smoke rose from cooking fires and children played between the shelters while women worked at various tasks. As they rode into camp, people stopped what they were doing to stare at Rebecca. Some looked curious, others suspicious, and a few appeared openly hostile. Children peeked out from behind their mothers' skirts, whispering and pointing. Ayan helped Rebecca down from the horse near one of the larger wickiups. An older woman emerged from the shelter, her gray hair braided with colored beads. Her face was weathered by years in the sun, but her eyes were sharp and intelligent. This is Desba, Ayan said. She is medicine woman and keeper of traditions. Also my grandmother. Desba walked around Rebecca slowly, studying her like she was examining a horse for sale. She spoke in Apache to Ayan, who responded with what sounded like explanations. Finally, Desba spoke in English. You run from bad men? Yes, Rebecca replied. You know Apache ways? No, but I want to learn. Desba nodded slowly. Learning is good. But Apache life is hard, not like white woman's life in town. Here everyone works. Everyone helps tribes survive. You understand? I understand. We see, Desba said. First you eat. Then we find what skills you have. She led Rebecca to a fire where several women were preparing food. They looked up as she approached, their faces showing a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Desba spoke to them in Apache, and one of the younger women, not much older than Rebecca herself, came forward. I am Itzel, she said in careful English. I teach you some things about living here. Itzel had kind eyes and a gentle smile that made Rebecca feel a little less nervous. She handed Rebecca a bowl made from a gourd and filled it with what looked like a stew made from meat and corn. Thank you, Rebecca said, realizing she was hungry. The food was different from what she was used to, but it tasted good. As she ate, Rebecca watched the life of the camp going on around her. Men worked on weapons and horse gear. Women prepared food, made clothes, and tended to children. The children played games that involved a lot of running and laughing. It was so different from the life she had known in town, but there was something appealing about it. Everyone seemed to have a purpose, a role to play in keeping the community alive and strong. Why did Ayan help you? Itzel asked, sitting down beside her. Rebecca told her about the auction, about Drake, about Ayan appearing just when she needed help most. Itzel listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally. When Rebecca finished, Itzel was quiet for a moment. Ayan's family was killed by soldiers 2 winters ago, she finally said. His parents, his sister, his young brother. He was away hunting when it happened. When he returned, he found only ashes and graves. Rebecca felt her heart sink. No wonder Ayan understood what it felt like to be hunted. That's why some people here don't trust you, Itzel continued. They think all white people are the same. That you will bring soldiers to our camp. I would never do that, Rebecca said firmly. I believe you, Itzel said, but you must prove it to others. Show them you are not like the white people who have hurt us. As the day went on, Rebecca tried to help wherever she could. She helped gather firewood. Though she wasn't very good at finding the right kind, she attempted to help with cooking but nearly burned the food. She tried to help repair a torn hide, but her stitching was clumsy. By evening, she was tired and discouraged. She seemed to be bad at everything that was important in Apache life. Ayan found her sitting alone by the stream that ran through the valley, watching the water flow over the rocks. Hard day? He asked, sitting down beside her. I'm useless here, Rebecca said sadly. I don't know how to do anything your people need done. You have been here one day, Ayan pointed out. Apache children spend years learning these skills. But I'm not a child. I should be able to help somehow. Ayan was quiet for a moment, then asked, What could you do in your old life? Rebecca thought about it. I could read and write. I kept my father's accounts for the farm. I could figure numbers and plan things. The next morning, Rebecca woke before dawn to the sound of someone moving around outside her wickiup. She peeked through the opening to see Itzel preparing to leave camp with several other women, carrying baskets and digging tools. "Where are you going?" Rebecca asked, emerging from her shelter. "To gather plants for medicine and food," Itzel replied. "You come learn." Rebecca quickly braided her hair and followed the group of women out of camp. The mountain air was cool and fresh, and the first light of dawn was painting the sky pink and gold. As they walked through the forest, the women showed Rebecca which plants were useful and which were dangerous. Some leaves could be made into tea for stomach pain. Certain roots could be ground into flour for bread. Other plants were poisonous and had to be avoided completely. "This one," said Kaya, an older woman with intricate tattoos on her chin, pointing to a small plant with silver-green leaves. "Good for wounds. Stops bleeding." Rebecca tried to remember everything they showed her, but there was so much to learn. Every plant seemed to have a purpose, either for food, medicine, or making tools and clothes. Her hands, soft from town life, quickly became scratched and dirty from digging roots and gathering thorny plants. When she complained about a cut on her finger, the women looked at her with amusement. "Apache women have strong hands," Kaya said matter-of-factly. "Your hands will learn." By midday, Rebecca's back ached from bending over to dig roots and her arms were covered in scratches. When they stopped to rest and eat, she collapsed gratefully in the shade of a large pine tree. "Tired already?" asked Nayeli, a young woman about Rebecca's age who had been watching her with obvious skepticism all morning. "I'm not used to this kind of work," Rebecca admitted. "White women are weak," Nayeli said with a dismissive tone. "They sit in houses and let men do all the hard work." "That's not true," Rebecca said, feeling defensive. "I worked on my father's farm. I've done hard work before. Farm work is not Apache work," Nayeli shot back. "Here women must know how to survive in mountains, in desert. Must know which plants feed family when hunting is bad. Must know how to hide from enemies, how to pack camp quickly when soldiers come." The other women watched this exchange with interest but said nothing. Rebecca realized this was a test of some kind. "Then teach me," Rebecca said, meeting Nayeli's challenging stare. "Show me how to be strong like Apache women." Nayeli smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "We see." For the rest of the day, Nayeli seemed to take pleasure in giving Rebecca the hardest tasks. She had her dig for roots in rocky ground that broke her fingernails. She sent her climbing up steep slopes to gather berries from thorny bushes that tore at her dress and skin. When they returned to camp that evening, Rebecca was exhausted and covered in dirt and scratches. Her hands were bleeding from several cuts and her dress was torn in multiple places. Ayan saw her condition and frowned. "What happened to you?" "Learning to be Apache," Rebecca replied, trying to keep the discouragement out of her voice. "Some lessons are harder than others," Desba said, appearing beside them. She examined Rebecca's hands and made disapproving sounds. "Come, I fix these cuts." In Desba's wiki-up, the medicine woman cleaned Rebecca's wounds and applied a paste made from the same plant Kaya had shown her earlier. The medicine stung at first, then felt cool and soothing. "Nayeli tests you," Desba said as she worked. "She lost husband to white soldiers last year. Has anger in her heart." "I understand her anger," Rebecca said, "but I'm not her enemy." "You must show her this with actions, not words," Desba advised. "Apache people judge by what you do, not what you say." Over the following days, Rebecca threw herself into learning Apache ways. She practiced making fire without matches until her hands were raw from rubbing sticks together. She learned to identify animal tracks and to move quietly through the forest without snapping twigs or rustling leaves. Itzel taught her how to prepare different kinds of food, how to grind corn into meal, how to dry meat so it would last through winter, how to find water in seemingly dry stream beds. The work was harder than anything Rebecca had ever done, but slowly she began to get stronger. Her hands developed calluses that protected them from thorns and rough work. Her pale skin darkened from constant exposure to the sun. More importantly, she began to understand the rhythm of Apache life. Everything had a purpose and a season. Nothing was wasted. When an animal was killed for food, every part was used. Meat for eating, hide for clothing and shelter, bones for tools and needles. "White people take and give nothing back," Kaya explained one day as they worked together to scrape a deer hide. "Apache take only what is needed, and always thank the spirits for what is given." Rebecca found this way of thinking appealing. In town, people always seemed to want more than they had. More money, more land, more possessions. But here, People seemed content with having enough. After 2 weeks in the camp, Rebecca was beginning to feel like she might actually belong when everything changed. She was helping Itzel repair a torn wiki-up cover when they heard horses approaching fast. Warriors throughout the camp immediately grabbed their weapons and took defensive positions. A single Apache rider galloped into camp, his horse lathered with sweat and breathing hard. He spoke rapidly in Apache to Nalnish, gesturing wildly with his hands. Rebecca didn't need to understand the language to know it was bad news. She could see it in the faces of everyone around her. "What's wrong?" she asked Itzel. "Scout reports soldiers moving this way," Itzel replied, her face pale. "Many soldiers, with Apache scouts who know our hiding places." "Apache scouts?" Rebecca was confused. "You mean Apache are helping the soldiers?" "Some Apache work for Army," Itzel explained bitterly. "They get paid money, get food for their families. But they betray their own people to get these things." Nalnish called out orders in Apache, and the camp immediately burst into activity. Women began taking down wiki-ups and packing belongings. Men readied weapons and prepared horses. "We must move camp quickly," Desba told Rebecca. "Soldiers are maybe 2 days away. If they find us here, many will die." Rebecca helped as best she could, but she felt useless again. Everyone else knew exactly what to do and how to do it quickly. She fumbled with ropes and dropped things as she tried to help pack. "Let me," Nayeli said impatiently, pushing Rebecca aside to properly secure a bundle of supplies. "I'm trying to help," Rebecca protested. "You help by staying out of way," Nayeli snapped. "This is Apache business." The word stung, but Rebecca stepped back and watched as the Apache people efficiently broke down their entire camp in just a few hours. It was impressive how quickly they could move when they needed to. As they prepared to leave, Rebecca overheard part of a conversation between Nalnish and some of his warriors. They were speaking in Apache, but she caught a few English words that made her blood run cold. "White woman. Reward for information. Soldiers know." Rebecca's heart started pounding. She grabbed Ayan's arm as he walked past. "They're talking about me, aren't they?" she said. "The soldiers are looking for me specifically." Ayan's face was grim. "Drake has offered reward for information about where you are. Some people will sell their own mothers for enough money." "I have to leave," Rebecca said immediately. "I can't let your people get hurt because of me." "Where will you go?" Ayan asked. "Desert will kill you in 2 days if soldiers don't find you first." "I don't know, but I can't stay here. I won't be responsible for people getting killed." Ayan was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "There is another way." "But is dangerous in what way?" "We can take you deeper into mountains to Hidden Valley where even Apache scouts don't know to look. But journey is hard, and if soldiers catch us..." "What if they catch us?" "They will kill me and take you back to Drake." Rebecca looked around at the Apache people hurrying to pack their belongings. Children helped their parents load horses. Elderly people were being helped onto travois pulled by strong horses. These people had already lost so much to the white man's wars. She couldn't bear the thought of bringing more death to them. "We go to the Hidden Valley," she decided, "even if it's dangerous." Nayeli appeared beside them, her face angry. "I heard what you said. You think running away will save us? Soldiers will still come. We'll still hunt Apache." "At least they won't find me here," Rebecca replied. "And when they don't find you, they will torture Apache people until someone tells them where you went," Nayeli said harshly. "You think your leaving will save us? It will only make things worse." Rebecca felt her heart sink. Nayeli was right. No matter what she did, her presence was putting these people in danger. "Then what do you suggest?" Rebecca asked. "I suggest you never should have come here," Nayeli said bluntly. "But since you did, now you must face consequences like Apache person. No more running, no more being weak white woman who lets others fight her battles." "What do you mean?" "I mean, if you want to be Apache, you fight like Apache. You learn to use weapons. You learn to be warrior, not just gatherer of plants." Nalnish, who had been listening to their conversation, stepped forward. "Nayeli speaks truth. If you stay with us, you must be able to defend yourself and others." Apache women are not helpless, Rebecca thought about this. She had never held a weapon in her life except for the old rifle her father had kept for hunting. The idea of fighting terrified her. The Hidden Valley was even more remote than Rebecca could have imagined. They had ridden for 3 days through mountain passes so narrow that sometimes they had to dismount and lead the horses through on foot. The trail was dangerous with loose rocks that could send horse and rider tumbling into deep ravines. On the second day, they had to stop when elderly Tala's horse went lame on the rocky path. Rebecca watched as the Apache people worked together to solve the problem. Some redistributed Tala's belongings among the other horses, while others fashioned a walking stick to help her travel on foot. "Why don't we just leave the old woman behind?" Rebecca asked Itzel quietly. "She's slowing us down and the soldiers might catch up." Itzel looked at her with shock. "Apache do not abandon their elders. Tala has wisdom and knowledge. She taught many of us the old ways. We protect her as she once protected us." Rebecca felt ashamed of her suggestion. In town, old people who couldn't take care of themselves were often put in poorhouses or left to fend for themselves. But here, age brought respect and protection. The hidden valley, when they finally reached it, was worth the difficult journey. It was completely surrounded by high cliffs, with only one narrow entrance that could easily be defended. A clear stream ran through the middle, and there was enough grass for the horses and game for hunting. "This place has been Apache's secret for many generations," Ayan explained as they set up camp. "My great-grandfather's great-grandfather hid here from Spanish soldiers. The entrance cannot be seen from outside, and the cliffs protect us from attack." That first night in the valley, Nayeli approached Rebecca with a bundle in her hands. "Time to begin your warrior training," she said, unwrapping the bundle to reveal a bow and arrows, a knife, and a war club made from hardwood with a stone head. Rebecca stared at the weapons nervously. "I don't know how to use any of these." "Then you learn quickly," Nayeli said matter-of-factly. "Soldiers will not wait for you to get ready." For the next several weeks, Rebecca's days were divided between learning survival skills and warrior training. In the mornings, she would practice with weapons under Nayeli's demanding instruction. In the afternoons, she continued learning traditional women's work with Itzel and the other women. Learning to use the bow was frustrating. Her first attempt sent arrows flying wildly in every direction, except toward the target. Her fingers bled from the bowstring, and her arm ached from pulling the heavy draw weight. "Your stance is wrong," Nayeli said for the 100th time, repositioning Rebecca's feet. "And you grip too tight. Bow is like wild horse. You must be firm but not fight it." Slowly, Rebecca began to improve. Her arrows started hitting the target more often than missing it. Her fingers developed calluses that protected them from the string. Most importantly, she began to understand the rhythm and flow of shooting. Knife fighting was even more challenging. Nayeli showed her how to hold the weapon, how to move her feet, how to block and attack. But Rebecca was clumsy and slow, often ending up on the ground with Nayeli's wooden practice knife at her throat. "You think too much," Nayeli said after knocking Rebecca down for the 10th time that day. "In real fight, you have no time to think. Must act from instinct." "How do I develop instinct?" Rebecca asked, breathing hard. "Practice until movements become part of you. Like walking or breathing." The most surprising part of her training was learning to ride Apache style. Rebecca thought she knew how to ride from her farm days, but Apache riding was completely different. They rode bareback, guiding their horses with subtle shifts in weight and position rather than reins and saddles. Ayan took over this part of her training personally. He was patient but demanding, making her practice mounting and dismounting while the horse was moving, teaching her to hang off the side of the horse to use it as a shield, showing her how to shoot arrows accurately while riding at full gallop. "Apache warrior must be one with horse," he explained as they practiced in a meadow at the far end of the valley. "Horse is not just animal you sit on. His partner, friend, sometimes difference between life and death." Rebecca found herself looking forward to these riding lessons more than any other part of her training. Not just because Ayan was a good teacher, but because she enjoyed spending time with him. During these sessions, away from the rest of the band, they would talk about many things. "Tell me about your family," Rebecca said one afternoon as they rested their horses by the stream. Ayan was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with sadness. "My father was war chief like Nalnish. Strong leader, brave warrior. My mother was known for her beautiful beadwork and her wisdom in settling disputes. My sister, Desba, named for our grandmother, was only 14. She loved to sing and was learning to be medicine woman. My brother, Kale, was 10. He wanted to be greatest Apache warrior who ever lived. What happened to them? I was away on hunt with 3 other warriors. We had been tracking elk for 5 days and were far from camp. When we returned, Ayan's hands clenched into fists. The soldiers had come in the night. They said later they were looking for raiders who had attacked wagon train. But there were no raiders in our camp, just families trying to live in peace. Rebecca reached out and touched his hand. I'm sorry. They killed the men who fought back. The others they took to reservation. My mother, my sister, my brother. I tried to follow, to rescue them. But by time I reached reservation, they were dead. Disease, they said. But I think they died of broken hearts. That's terrible, Rebecca whispered. That is why I understand your situation, Ayan said. Both of us have lost everything to men who think they own the world. As the weeks passed, Rebecca noticed that her feelings for Ayan were growing stronger. She found herself thinking about him when they were apart, looking forward to their time together, watching him when she thought he wasn't looking. She thought she saw the same feelings reflected in his eyes, but she wasn't sure. Apache people were not as open with their emotions as the white people she had known. One evening, as she was practicing knife techniques alone near the stream, Ayan appeared beside her. Your form is much better, he said, watching her movements. Nayeli is a good teacher. Even if she terrifies me, Rebecca replied, continuing her practice routine. She respects you now, Ayan said. That is why she pushes you so hard. She sees warrior spirit in you. Rebecca stopped practicing and looked at him. Do you think I have warrior spirit? You broke free from auction block when most women would have accepted their fate. You chose to ride into unknown desert rather than submit to cruel man. You came to Apache camp and learned our ways even when some people were not welcoming. Yes, I think you have warrior spirit. They stood looking at each other in the fading light. Rebecca felt her heart beating faster. Rebecca, Ayan said softly, stepping closer to her. There is something I must tell you. Before he could continue, they heard voices calling from the main camp. Someone was shouting Ayan's name urgently. What is it? Rebecca asked, alarmed. They ran back to camp to find everyone gathered around Nalnish, who was speaking with a young Apache scout who had just ridden in. What's happening? Ayan asked. Scouts report soldiers have found our old camp, Nalnish said grimly. They are questioning Apache people at reservation, trying to learn where we went. Did anyone tell them? Rebecca asked, her heart sinking. Not yet, the scout replied in heavily accented English. But soldiers have ways of making people talk. And they bring Apache tracker who knows these mountains well. Rebecca felt the familiar weight of guilt settling on her shoulders. Once again, her presence was putting innocent people in danger. I should leave, she said immediately. Draw them away from here. Where would you go? Nalnish asked. And how far would you get on your own? Rebecca had no answer for that. She had learned much in the past weeks, but she was still far from being able to survive alone in the wilderness. There is another option, Ayan said slowly. We could take Rebecca across the border into Mexico. She would be safe there and soldiers could not follow. That is a long journey through dangerous country, Nalnish pointed out. And it would take our best warriors away from here when we may need to defend this place. I'll go alone, Rebecca said. Just give me a horse and directions. I won't put anyone else at risk. You would die in 2 days, Naley said bluntly. Desert between here and Mexico is full of dangers you cannot imagine. Bandits, wild animals, poisonous snakes, lack of water. Then what do you suggest? Rebecca asked. We fight, Nayeli said simply. If soldiers come, we show them that Apache are not easy prey. These are not just a few soldiers, the scout warned. Whole cavalry unit. Maybe 40 men with good weapons and supplies. Then we make them pay dearly for whatever they take, Nayeli replied. Rebecca looked around at the faces of the Apache people. These people had become her family over the past weeks. The thought of them dying because of her made her feel sick. I won't let that happen, she said firmly. There has to be another way. That night, as the camp discussed their options, Rebecca made a decision. She would not run away and leave these people to face consequences of helping her. But she also would not sit passively while they prepared for a battle that might destroy them. She would find a third option, even if she had to create it herself. 3 days later, another scout arrived with news that made everyone's blood run cold. The cavalry unit was less than a day's ride away, and they were being led by someone who knew exactly where to look. The tracker with them is Chuli, the scout reported to Nalnish. He was born in these mountains, but now works for Army. Rebecca saw the faces around the fire turn grim at this news. She didn't understand why this particular tracker was so concerning until Itzel explained. Chuli knows all the old hiding places, Itzel said quietly. He helped his grandfather dig the hidden water caches, knows which trails are safe and which are traps. If anyone can find this valley, it is him. Why does he work for the soldiers? Rebecca asked. His family starves on reservation, Desba answered sadly. Army promises food and money for his children if he helps them hunt Apache who refuse to surrender. Rebecca felt a chill run down her spine. She understood now that this wasn't just about her anymore. The soldiers weren't just looking for a runaway woman. They were using her disappearance as an excuse to hunt down Apache people who had refused to live on the reservation. That evening, as the camp prepared defenses and planned escape routes, Ayan found Rebecca sitting alone on a rocky outcrop overlooking the valley entrance. "You are thinking dangerous thoughts," he said, settling down beside her. "How do you know what I'm thinking? I see it in your eyes. Same look you had before you jumped from auction platform." Rebecca was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What would happen if I went back to Drake willingly?" "You would become his slave," Ayan said immediately. "Or worse. But the soldiers would stop hunting Apache people." "You think Drake cares about Apache? He uses your disappearance as excuse to send soldiers after us. But real reason is different. He wants our land for his cattle. Your return would not change this." Rebecca knew Ayan was probably right, but she still felt responsible for the danger facing these people. "Chuli will find this place eventually," she said. "And when he does, people will die because of me." "People die because soldiers come to kill them," Ayan corrected. "Not because you seek freedom." They sat in silence as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. Finally, Ayan spoke again. "There is something I have wanted to say to you for many days." Rebecca turned to look at him, her heart beginning to beat faster. "In Apache tradition," Ayan continued, "when warrior chooses woman to be his wife, he must prove he can provide for her and protect her. Must show he is worthy of her trust." "Ayan, I know you come from different world," he said quickly. "I know Apache ways are strange to you. But these weeks together, watching you grow strong, seeing your courage—" He paused, searching for words. "My heart chooses you." Rebecca felt tears starting in her eyes. "My heart chooses you too," she whispered. They moved closer to each other, and Rebecca felt Ayan's hand gently touch her face. For a moment, sitting there in the fading light with the man she had come to love, she almost forgot about the soldiers and the danger. Then they heard hoofbeats echoing off the valley walls. Both of them jumped to their feet, looking toward the narrow entrance to the valley. A single rider was approaching at full gallop, bent low over his horse's neck. It was one of the scouts they had sent out to watch for the approaching soldiers. As he got closer, they could see that his horse was foam-covered and exhausted from hard riding. "Soldiers," he called out as he reached the camp. "They come now!" Chuli leads them straight to hidden entrance. The camp exploded into activity. Warriors grabbed weapons and took positions at the valley entrance. Women and children were quickly moved to the far end of the valley where a narrow canyon offered an escape route into even deeper mountains. "How many soldiers?" Alnish demanded. 40 men, maybe more," the scout replied. "They come fast, we'll be here before morning." Rebecca felt the world spinning around her. This was it, the moment she had been dreading. Because of her, these people who had become her family were about to face a battle they might not survive. "I have to go to them," she said suddenly. "Tell them I surrender willingly." "No," Ayan said firmly. "We have discussed this. People are going to die," Rebecca said desperately. "Children, elders, warriors with families. I can't live with that. And I cannot live knowing I let you sacrifice yourself," Ayan replied. Nayeli, who had been listening to their conversation, stepped forward. "There is third choice," she said quietly. "What do you mean?" Rebecca asked. "We all leave. Tonight. Take only what we can carry, travel fast and light. Escape through back canyon before soldiers arrive." "Where would we go?" Nalnish asked. "South," Nayeli replied. "Cross into Mexico. Find new place to live away from soldiers and reservations. That is 1,000-mile journey through hostile territory," one of the other warriors pointed out. "With children and elders, many would not survive. But some would," Nayeli said. "Better than fighting battle we cannot win." Rebecca looked around at the faces of the Apache people. They were scared but determined. These were people who had already lost so much. Their original lands, family members, their traditional way of life. Now they were being asked to give up even more because of her. "How long would it take to reach Mexico?" she asked. "Many weeks," Ayan replied. maybe months. We would have to avoid towns, stay away from main trails, hunt and forage for food. And there's no guarantee we'd be safe even there, Nalnish added. Mexican soldiers also hunt Apache sometimes. Rebecca felt the weight of an impossible decision settling on her shoulders. Stay and fight a battle they couldn't win, flee into the unknown and risk slow death in the wilderness, or surrender herself and hope it would save the others. None of the choices were good. That night, as the Apache people prepared for whatever was coming, Rebecca made her decision. She would not run away again. She would not hide behind others while they suffered for her sake, but she also would not simply surrender and hope for the best. She had learned Apache ways. She had become a warrior. Now it was time to fight like one. She found Ayan checking weapons with the other warriors. "I want to fight," she told him. "Rebecca, no, is too dangerous." "Everything is dangerous now," she replied. "But I'm not the helpless woman you saved from that auction block anymore. I'm Apache now. I fight with my people." Ayan looked into her eyes and saw the determination there. After a moment, he nodded. "Then we fight together," he said. As dawn approached, Rebecca took her position with the other defenders at the valley entrance. She held her bow ready, arrows within easy reach. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. She thought about that day in Santa Fe when Drake had tried to buy her. She had run then, desperate and afraid. Now she was about to face him again. But everything was different. She was different. The first light of dawn was just touching the mountain peaks when they heard the sound of many horses approaching the hidden entrance to the valley. "They come," Nalnish said quietly. Rebecca drew back her bowstring and waited. Whatever happened next, she would face it with courage. She would not be anyone's property ever again. In the distance, she could hear Drake's voice shouting orders to his men. "Spread out. Surround the entrance. I want that woman alive, but kill any Apache who resist." Rebecca smiled grimly. Drake was about to learn that the woman he thought he owned had learned to bite back. The battle for the hidden valley was about to begin. The first soldier to enter the narrow passage into the valley never knew what hit him. Nalnish's arrow took him clean off his horse before he could even draw his weapon. The horse, riderless and spooked, bolted back toward the entrance, causing confusion among the cavalry troops trying to follow. "Hold positions," Rebecca heard Drake shouting from somewhere outside the valley. "Don't bunch up in that passage." But the entrance was so narrow that the soldiers had no choice but to come through in single file or small groups, which made them easy targets for the Apache defenders positioned on the rocky walls above. Rebecca's first shot missed its target, the arrow clattering harmlessly off a rock. Her hands were shaking with nervousness despite all her training. "Breathe," Ayan said quietly from his position beside her. "Remember what you learned?" Rebecca took a deep breath, knocked another arrow, and waited. When the next soldier appeared in her sight, she drew back smoothly and released. This time her arrow found its mark, striking the man in the shoulder and spinning him from his saddle. The battle for the valley entrance continued for over an hour. The Apache defenders had the advantage of position and cover, while the soldiers were forced to attack through a narrow space with high walls on both sides. Several more cavalrymen fell to Apache arrows and spears, but Rebecca could see that the Apache were running low on arrows, and the soldiers kept coming. Drake had brought more men than they had expected, and he seemed willing to sacrifice as many as necessary to take the valley. "We cannot hold much longer," Nalnish called out during a brief pause in the fighting. "They have too many men." "What about the escape route?" Ayan asked. "Scouts report soldiers already moving to Blockback Canyon," one of the younger warriors replied. "We are trapped." Rebecca felt her heart sink. This was exactly what she had feared would happen. The Apache people were going to be destroyed because of her. Then she heard Drake's voice echoing off the valley walls, amplified by a speaking trumpet. "Apache, I know you can hear me. I'm not here for you. I only want the white woman you're hiding. Send her out, and my men and I will leave peacefully." "Lies," Naily spat. White man's words are like wind. They blow away when convenient. But Rebecca knew this might be their only chance to avoid complete destruction. She started to stand up, but Ayan grabbed her arm. "You are not going out there," he said firmly. "If there's a chance it will save lives." "There is no chance," Ayan interrupted. "Drake wants excuse to kill Apache. If you surrender, he will take you and then attack anyway." Drake's voice came again. "You have 1 hour to decide. After that, we come in and take her by force. Anyone who stands in our way will be shot as hostiles. The Apache defenders used the temporary ceasefire to redistribute ammunition and check their weapons, but everyone knew they were in a desperate situation. That's when Desba appeared with an idea that surprised everyone. "There is old Apache trick," she said to Nalnish. "My grandfather told me stories. When enemy has overwhelming force, sometimes you make them think you are stronger than you are." "What do you mean?" Rebecca asked. "We make them afraid," Desba explained. "Make them think attacking us will cost more than they want to pay." "How?" "Apache war cry," Desba said with a grim smile. "Make noise like there are hundreds of warriors hidden in these rocks. Make them think about their wives and children back home." It was a desperate plan, but it might work. Apache war cries were legendary throughout the Southwest. Even experienced soldiers often lost their nerve when they heard the blood-chilling sounds echoing off canyon walls. "Everyone who can make noise, spread out along the cliffs," Nalnish ordered. "On my signal, we show these soldiers what Apache sound like when we are angry." The defenders spread out among the rocks overlooking the valley entrance. Rebecca found herself crouched behind a boulder with Itzel and two of the older boys who were too young to fight, but old enough to make noise. "Remember," Itzel whispered. "Apache war cry comes from deep in belly, not from throat. Must sound like mountain lion mixed with thunder." Rebecca practiced quietly, trying to get the sound right. It felt strange, but she was determined to do her part. Drake's hour was almost up when Nalnish gave the signal. The sound that erupted from the rocks around the valley entrance was unlike anything Rebecca had ever heard. It started as a low growling that seemed to come from the earth itself, then built into a howling, shrieking cacophony that echoed and re-echoed off the stone walls until it sounded like an army of demons. Even knowing it was coming, Rebecca felt chills run down her spine. She could only imagine what it sounded like to the soldiers waiting outside. The Apache kept up the war cries for several minutes, creating an overlapping wave of sound that seemed to go on forever. When they finally stopped, the silence that followed was deafening. Then they heard something that gave them hope. The sound of horses moving away from the valley entrance. "They retreat?" one of the young warriors asked hopefully. "Some of them," Ayan replied, listening carefully. "But not all." He was right. After about 10 minutes, they heard Drake's voice again, but now it sounded angry and desperate. "All right, you want to play games? We'll burn you out. Bring up the torches." Rebecca's blood went cold. If the soldiers started fires in the narrow entrance passage, the smoke would fill the valley and force everyone out into the open. "We have to stop them," she said. "How?" Nayeli asked. "We are almost out of arrows." That's when Rebecca made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. "I'm going out there," she announced. "Absolutely not," Ayan said immediately. "Not to surrender?" Rebecca clarified. "To fight, face to face with Drake." "That is suicide," Nalnish pointed out. "Maybe," Rebecca agreed. "But it's also the only way to end this without everyone dying." She explained her plan. It was risky and probably crazy, but it might work. More importantly, it was the only option they had left. "If I can challenge Drake to single combat, Apache tradition says his men have to honor the outcome," she said. "Drake is not Apache," Itzel pointed out. "He will not follow Apache traditions. But his men might hesitate to interfere if they think their leader should be able to handle one woman," Rebecca replied. "And if I can wound him or even just humiliate him in front of his troops, it might give us the advantage we need." It was a desperate plan, but they were in a desperate situation. "I will go with you," Ayan said. "No," Rebecca replied firmly. "This is something I have to do alone. You've all risked enough for me." "Rebecca," Ayan took her hands in his. "If something happens to you, then at least I'll have lived free," Rebecca said, looking into his eyes. "That's more than I would have had if you hadn't saved me." Before anyone could stop her, Rebecca walked to the edge of the rocks and called out to Drake. "Drake." "I'm coming out!" "But not to surrender. If you want me, you'll have to take me." Then she started climbing down toward the valley entrance, her weapons ready and her heart pounding with determination. Behind her, she could hear Ayan calling her name, but she didn't look back. It was time to end this one way or another. Rebecca walked through the narrow entrance to the valley with her head held high and her bow in her hands. The morning sun was bright after the shadows of the valley, and she had to squint to see the line of cavalry soldiers spread out across the desert floor. There were more of them than she had expected, at least 50 men with rifles and pistols, all pointed in her direction. For a moment her courage almost failed her. Then she saw Drake sitting on his black horse in the center of the line, and her anger gave her strength. "Well, well," Drake called out, his voice carrying easily across the desert air. The little bird finally decides to come out of her nest. "I'm not your little bird," Rebecca replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "And I'm not coming out to surrender." Drake laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "You think you have a choice in the matter? Look around you, girl. You're outnumbered 50-1. "Numbers don't always matter," Rebecca said, remembering something Nayeli had taught her. "Sometimes courage is worth more than bullets." "Courage?" Drake spurred his horse forward, stopping just out of arrow range. "What would you know about courage? You're nothing but a piece of property that ran away from its owner." "I was never your property," Rebecca said firmly. "People aren't things to be bought and sold." "Everything has a price," Drake replied. "Even you. Though after all the trouble you've caused me, that price has gone up considerably." Behind Drake, Rebecca could see his men shifting nervously. Some of them were looking toward the rocks where they knew Apache warriors were hidden. The war cries had clearly made an impression. "I have a proposition for you." "Drake," Rebecca called out. "You're hardly in a position to make propositions." "I think I am," Rebecca said, knocking an arrow to her bow. "You want me alive, which means you can't just shoot me down. And your men are scared of the Apache hiding in those rocks. So let's settle this like civilized people. What do you have in mind?" "Single combat. Just you and me. If you win, I'll come with you willingly and tell the Apache to let you leave in peace. If I win, you and your men ride away and never bother these people again." Drake stared at her for a moment, then threw back his head and laughed. "You want to fight me? A little slip of a girl against a grown man. Have you lost your mind?" "Maybe," Rebecca admitted. "But I'm serious about the challenge. Unless you're afraid to face one woman?" She saw Drake's face flush with anger at the suggestion he might be afraid. Behind him, some of his men were murmuring among themselves. She caught words like fair fight and sporting chance. "You think I'm afraid of you?" Drake snarled, dismounting from his horse. "Fine, I'll play your little game. But when I beat you, you're coming back with me. And these Apache savages are going to pay for every bit of trouble they've caused." "And if I win?" Rebecca pressed. "If you win," Drake said with a cruel smile, "which you won't, then we ride away. You have my word as a gentleman." Rebecca almost laughed at that. Drake's word as a gentleman wasn't worth much, but she had counted on his pride being stronger than his common sense. Drake drew his pistol and tossed it to one of his men, then pulled out a large knife with a gleaming blade. "Since you seem to favor primitive weapons," he said mockingly. Rebecca set down her bow and drew her own knife, the one Nayeli had given her. It looked small and crude compared to Drake's weapon, but she had learned to trust it. "Anytime you're ready, girl," Drake said, beginning to circle her like a predator stalking prey. Rebecca remembered everything Nayeli had taught her about knife fighting. "Stay light on your feet. Watch your opponent's eyes, not his weapon. Use his size and strength against him." Drake was bigger and stronger, but he was also overconfident. He came at her with a wild swing, expecting to end the fight quickly. Rebecca ducked under his arm and slashed at his wrist, drawing first blood. Drake cursed and jumped back, looking at the cut on his hand with surprise. "Lucky shot," he muttered, but now he was taking her more seriously. His next attack was more cautious, more controlled. He feinted left, then came in from the right. Rebecca barely managed to block the strike, and she felt the shock of impact run up her arm. They circled each other again, both breathing hard. Rebecca could hear the Apache warriors above calling encouragement in their own language, and the cavalry soldiers muttering nervously among themselves. Drake came at her again, and this time Rebecca wasn't quick enough. His blade sliced across her upper arm, tearing her shirt and leaving a burning line of pain. She stumbled backward, trying to stay out of reach of his longer knife. "Getting tired already?" Drake taunted. "This is what happens when you forget your place." But Rebecca had been learning more than just how to fight in the past weeks. She had been learning how to think like an Apache warrior, how to use the land itself as a weapon. She led Drake toward a patch of loose rocks, pretending to be more hurt than she actually was. When he lunged forward to finish her off, she rolled to the side and kicked hard at the loose stones. Drake stumbled as the rocks shifted under his feet, and Rebecca took advantage of his momentary loss of balance. She came up from her roll and drove her knife toward his side. Drake was fast enough to partially block the strike. but not fast enough to avoid it completely. Rebecca's blade sliced along his ribs, leaving a deep gash that immediately began bleeding heavily. Now it was Drake who stumbled backward, one hand pressed to his wounded side. His face was pale, and Rebecca could see fear in his eyes for the first time. "You little hellcat," he gasped. "I'm going to make you pay for that." But his next attack was clumsy and desperate. Rebecca could see that the wound was affecting his balance and coordination. She dodged his wild swing and came in close, pressing her knife to his throat. "Yield," she said quietly. Drake stood very still, feeling the sharp edge of her blade against his skin. Around them, both the Apache warriors and the cavalry soldiers watched in stunned silence. "You can't kill me," Drake said, but his voice lacked conviction. "My men will never let you leave this desert alive." "Maybe not," Rebecca agreed. "But you'll be dead, and that seems like a fair trade." "Wait," came a voice from the line of soldiers. A sergeant with gray hair and tired eyes stepped forward. "The lady won fair and square, Mr. Drake. A deal's a deal." "That's mutiny, Sergeant," Drake hissed. "No, sir," the sergeant replied calmly. "That's honor, something we seem to have forgotten lately." Several other soldiers nodded in agreement. Rebecca realized that not all of Drake's men were as eager for violence as their leader. "Here's what's going to happen," Rebecca said, still holding her knife to Drake's throat. "You and your men are going to ride away from here and never come back. You're going to tell everyone that the Apache in this valley are under my protection, and you're going to leave me and my people alone." "Your people?" Drake asked with a sneer. "My people," Rebecca confirmed. "I'm Apache now. This is my family." From the rocks above, she heard Ayan call out in Apache, then in English, "Rebecca speaks truth. She is daughter of the mountain people now." Other voices joined in, both Apache and, surprisingly, some of the soldiers. The fair fight had impressed more people than Rebecca had expected. "All right," Drake said finally. "You win, but this isn't over. Sooner or later you'll make a mistake, and when you do—" "When I do, I'll face whatever comes," Rebecca said. "But today you ride away." She stepped back, keeping her knife ready but no longer threatening Drake directly. The man pressed his hand to his wounded side and walked slowly back to his horse. "Mount up," the sergeant called to the other soldiers. "We're heading back to town." As the cavalry prepared to leave, the sergeant approached Rebecca. "Begging your pardon, miss," he said quietly, "but that was the bravest thing I've seen in 20 years of soldiering. Whatever they say about you in town, you've got the respect of these men." "Thank you, Sergeant," Rebecca replied. "I hope we never have to meet again under these circumstances." "Yes, ma'am. So do I." Within an hour, the entire cavalry unit was riding away across the desert, leaving only dust clouds to mark their passage. Rebecca stood watching them go until they disappeared completely, then finally allowed herself to collapse. Ayan was beside her in an instant, checking her wound and helping her back into the valley. "That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I have ever seen," he said as Desba cleaned and bandaged the cut on her arm. "Maybe both," Rebecca admitted. "But it worked. This time," Nalnish said, joining them. "But Drake will not forget this humiliation. He will find other ways to cause trouble." "Then we'll be ready for him," Rebecca said firmly. Over the following days, as word of the confrontation spread throughout the territory, Rebecca found herself becoming something of a legend. Stories grew in the telling, until people spoke of the white woman who had learned Apache, ways and faced down an entire cavalry unit with nothing but courage and a knife. Some stories said she could shoot the wings off a fly at 100 yards. Others claimed she could track a ghost across solid rock. All of them agreed that she was not someone to be taken lightly. More importantly, her victory had shown other Apache bands that it was possible to stand up to white aggression and win. Small groups began joining Nalnish's band, bringing news and skills that strengthened the entire community. 3 months after the battle, Rebecca and Ayan were married in a traditional,